seeds versus purchased plants? That's a question always. Many crops do best when they're direct sown. Okay, have the faith. The plants know exactly what they're doing. You might not, but they do. And as long as you give them the appropriate habitat to grow in, they're going to do okay, usually sown directly. Now, well, a list of plants that do well like that, I guess. Carrots, for instance. Don't try to transplant carrots. It's impossible. It's crazy. Plant them directly. Beans, snap beans, you know, hard beans, definitely plant them directly. Don't buy plants. They're wasting your money. It's so easy. Just as long as you keep the birds off. We'll go to that later. But beets, for instance. I hate beets. But if you grow them, it's okay. You can grow beets, and they are much better when they're sown directly in the ground from a seed. Sunflowers, peas, these are all plants that there's no point in wasting your money on plants. In fact, sometimes it's very counterproductive that you do that. They don't do as well. You know, corn, for instance, if it's pot-bound, it's never going to work out well. You put it directly in the ground, then it's probably going to thrive as long as you have enough nitrogen out there for it. On the other hand, there are other plants that either do not emerge from the soil very well. Things that cross my mind, if you ever grown thyme from seed, for instance, or oregano from seed, this stuff sits like dust. Or tobacco, Nicotiana flowering tobacco, you know, the big white smelly flowering tobacco plant. The seeds look like dust. You spread it on top of you can't plant it. You have to lay it on top of the soil, and then the plants come up. It looks like algae for the first month, you know, and then finally you see leaves in the pot. All right, and so plants that are like that, definitely you're going to start them in a container first and get something big enough to handle before you can move it to the garden. There's also plants that take heat to get them to come up, and they're like a chili, for instance, or a tomato. These plants are going to bear over long seasons. If you can get the plant started ahead of the growing season, you get it in early so it can get that moisture, you know, of the last rains and so on, you're going to get a much longer season. You could grow a tomato by taking a seed out and put it in the ground. You will get tomatoes. I'm sure you've all had volunteers, right? Yeah. It works. It works. You just aren't going to get them as early. You know, and so it's nice to have the tomatoes started. Other plants that are better probably grown from starts would be all your cole crops. That's, you know, cabbages, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, collards, kohlrabis. You can grow them from seed too. I've grown them from seed in the ground, but they're easier if you start the plants in a hothouse or a greenhouse or a cold frame or something like that. Because the birds will tear them up, the snails eat the heck out of them, blah, blah, blah. There's so much stuff out in the garden that will just destroy these things as they're trying to come up. And so by getting a decent-sized plant before you put it in is a good idea. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, melons, onions. Now onions were back in fall, and you have the onions, already have them up, nice, big, fat, beautiful onions. But onion seeds are really weak to emerge, and so we start onions and then put a plant in. See, because it's easier to do that way than trying to sow them directly in the earth. You could sow them directly in the earth, but it's more challenging. It's much harder to do than sticking in a plant. As far as, you know, whether you're going to buy the plants or whether you're going to start the plants, well, if all you need is a half dozen tomato plants and 2 bell pepper to make you happy in the garden, I don't see the point in bothering to start the plants. It's not going to cost you that much to go out and buy them in the nursery, and as long as you can find the variety you're looking for. On the other hand, if you're very particular and there are certain varieties of things that you want, then you're probably going to have to start them if you want to guarantee that you're going to get that plant. But it will mean that you're going to have some special equipment. It doesn't need to be real expensive or very sophisticated, but to start plants and to do it successfully, there are several possible scenarios. The greenhouse obviously is the easiest way. So if you own a greenhouse, it's a piece of cake. You use that, okay? If you don't own a greenhouse, you can substitute what's called a cold frame. Does everybody know what a cold frame is? Mm-hmm. It's basically a little greenhouse, usually made out of an old storm window, and I mean it can be as funky as a bunch of straw bales, with an old storm window over it. I used to, when I lived in the Midwest, I used to take my tiller and run right down the garden rows, work some compost fertilizer in, and then I'd take great big old barn timbers. I had lots of barn timbers from dismantling barns, and I'd drop them on both sides of these beds that I'd till. The timbers would stand up about a foot high off the soil, and then I worked for a window mill, and so we had old windows, and I just dropped the windows on the top of the timbers. So I'd go in and I'd grow the tomatoes in the greenhouse, move the seedlings out when they were real small, and transplant literally thousands of them in rows through the garden, dropping storm windows over the top. And I used to make pretty good money from my neighbors by growing pepper and tomato plants that way. They always swore that with a wad of native Wisconsin dirt on the bottom made the thing better than when they bought it in a pot with potting soil somehow or whatever. They loved it. And it was real easy to grow huge volumes of plants that way with just old windows and some lumber. Okay, so it doesn't have to be real sophisticated. On a hot day you open the windows up. Otherwise you cook everything, close it at night. Worked out great till the day the bear decided he was going to walk across the top of the windows. Yeah, went right through. But anyway, I mean, you can use that. Another system that works really well for starting plants, and it's the fluorescent grow light. Use a regular 4-foot fluorescent fixture or even a 2-foot fixture. You buy the Agri-Labs, the ones with the right spectrum for your plants. You set them into the fixtures. I've used parachute cord on pulleys, even in the basement or the garage, so I can raise and lower the fixture to get it to the right height over the top of the plants. Then you just plant your stuff underneath the lights, and those lights, they'll have to be very close. It's just a few inches off of the plants to get enough radiation to do this, but you could even use a closet, I guess, if you don't mind the water. You know, a garage is actually best. It also requires a heater mat or a heater cable, because if you're working outside in a cold frame or in a greenhouse, my greenhouse is unheated. I don't have a furnace or anything for it. I just use an electric heater mat and a thermostat on the tables. That heats the soil from below. It gives me enough heat to raise peppers in there. And so there's a certain amount of equipment you're going to need if you want to do this. And if all you need is a half-dozen tomato plants, forget it. Go buy them at Dale. You know, but otherwise it's very challenging. It's a lot of fun. It can get to be habit forming. I'll be dead the day I don't start more pepper and tomato plants than I know what to do with. You know, it's just a thing that you can get into it. It's fun to do. I like it. It's great. Very rewarding, and it does allow you to control your varieties. If you're a very specific and picky person who thinks this vegetable is much better than that vegetable, the only way you'll guarantee it is by growing your own stuff. You know, I've never seen Tom Thumb lettuce, for instance, in a 6-pack hardly in the store the whole time I sold vegetables. Maybe once or twice, but very rare. That is a super lettuce. It's an old open pollinated thing, and under the weather conditions we've had here, I've been harvesting that stuff non-stop, and it is so sweet. Wonderful little tennis ball sized heads. Real cute. Tom Thumb it's called.